Welcome back, everyone. It is a gorgeous day here in the Adirondacks. We are still here in New York and we're doing a couple of reshoots. Again, I have to explain that my backup hard drive decided he'd had enough, and so I lost quite a few of the raw footage that I got. So we are doing a reshoot today. It is September 16th, 2025. And we are going to do a reshoot of Fort Ticonderoga. Hopefully the second time is the charm. I've had to do a couple of these. So it is almost 10 o'clock, going for 10 o'clock. And the fort opens at, I think, 9:30. So we should be there about 10 o'clock because we're not that far from there. And we're going to drive through the town of Ticonderoga to get there. So hang on, here we are on our way. So we're heading on up from the King's Garden to the fort, the actual fort. Caution, this particular road is pretty narrow, and it is not a one-way. This particular stretch is not a one-way. And this is the way to the exit. I'll be interested to see how many people are here because this is a weekday. And it is after the kids finish school. So I'll be interested to see how many people are actually here and what they're actually doing. And that's a look at the fort, the first look at the fort. Oh, we got longhorns. Longhorn cattle. Interesting. Didn't see them when I was here last time. So we are going to park where I can get some solar. It does look like you can go out that way to the garden, to the King's Garden. So this is the fort and the grounds. And the trees are starting to turn. And from that sign, it does look like you can get down to the King's Garden. It does look like the buses are starting to arrive. It is still early. This is a good day to tour. Fort Ticonderoga Log House Welcome Center, Fort Entrance, Museum, Store, and Cafe. And there's restaurants. There's a gift shop. And this is how you get into the fort.
I think our group is small enough that it fits into whatever the. So there was an amount you budgeted, there's an amount we subtracted from the art.
Very cool.
And then was the balance.
Very cool.
My normal office is down in Ticonderoga, so it's like, I don't know which one.
You're dressed for the weather.
Hey, I love shorts weather. When you're traveling in a van, you carry everything with you. So you're looking south along Lake Champlain. And at the very top of that mountain up there, that is Mount Defiance. And that is part of the fort, part of your admission. And we will do that. The colors, like I said, just look awful. I don't know if it's because we've been in a drought for as long as we've been in, but it doesn't look like they're going to be very spectacular this year. And this is the fort over here. This is a timeline. It is also written in French too. That again, just like Crown Point, that is very nice for them to do. The Lake Champlain Valley has long been at the crossroads of nations and peoples. The name Ticonderoga is a corruption of an Iroquoian word meaning a place between two waters, an acknowledgement of its location which made it central to the history of North America. 1609. A battle was fought on the shore of Lake Champlain at Ticonderoga between the Mohawks and Algonquin-speaking warriors from Canada. With the latter are three Frenchmen, including Samuel de Champlain, making this the first combat between Europeans and Native Americans in the Champlain Valley. 1609 to 1754. As warfare continues between Native and European powers, Ticonderoga's position puts it in the path of fighting men from many nations. French soldiers of the Carignan, I'm not going to pronounce that one either, regiment, traverse the peninsula in 1666 to strike at the Mohawk. In 1690, English and Native forces passed through to attack Canada, perpetrating a bloody escalation of colonial warfare. In 1755, French and British regular soldiers are transported to North America, fueling a colonial conflict begun in 1754, following a French defeat at the Battle of Lake George in September. Michael Chartier de, I'm going to try this one, Latbiniere begins to plan a fortification on the Ticonderoga Peninsula to secure the strategic water route to Canada. It is named Fort Carillon. The French appealed to native nations to aid them in their war against the English. Nearly 2,000 warriors from as far away as the Great Plains respond. The largest Native American military force of the 18th century. Assembling at Fort Carillon, they launched an attack on Fort William Henry in August. The attack is a success, but confusion and misunderstandings between the French and native expectations and assumptions caused their partnership to collapse. 1758, General James Abercrombie launches what at the time was the largest military force ever assembled in North America to assault Fort Carillon. On July 8th, outnumbered and lacking substantial native allies, the French, under the Marquis de Macomb, delivered a shocking defeat to the British from behind hastily built defenses on the rising ground about a half a mile to your left. Nearly 2,000 British and American casualties make it the bloodiest battle on the continent until the 1860s. With Quebec threatened by British attack, Fort Carillon is undermanned as another British army commanded by General Geoffrey Amherst approaches. Outnumbered, the French blow up the fort's powder magazine as they withdraw. Finally, in English hands, Fort Carillon is renamed Fort Ticonderoga. 1760 to 1775. Canada surrenders to the British in the fall of 1760, effectively ending the French and Indian War. From the end of hostilities until the opening of the American Revolution in 1775, British forces continuously garrisoned Fort Ticonderoga with small detachments. This period represents the longest the position was held by one power in its history. Early in the morning of May 10, 1775, less than a month after the commencement of hostilities between Britain and the American colonists, the small British garrison of the fort is surprised and captured. A force of colonials under the joint command of Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold delivers America a major moral and material victory at little cost. September 1775 to 1776. On December 5th, 1775, Henry Knox arrives at Ticonderoga from New York City on the direct orders of General George Washington. He selects 59 pieces of artillery, nearly 60 tons in weight, from Ticonderoga and other forts. These guns are hauled nearly 300 miles, where they are mounted to relieve the siege of Boston, which the British abandoned on March 17, 1776. 1776. Ticonderoga had served as a staging point for the American invasion of Canada, which after initial success collapses in early 1776. The shattered army retires to Ticonderoga to consolidate, retrain, and prepare land and naval defenses. When the British pursue, they are delayed at the Battle of Valcour Island by the American fleet. When the British test the lines at Ticonderoga on October 28th, they find well-prepared American troops blocking their path and turn back. 1777, General John Burgoyne launches a new British offensive anticipating a major siege of Ticonderoga on his way to Albany. As the British approach, the outnumbered Americans under General Arthur St. Clair evacuate Ticonderoga. On July 6th until November, Ticonderoga remains occupied by British and German soldiers, withstanding an American surprise attack in September before it is evacuated following word of Burgoyne's surrender at Saratoga. There's more of it. And there's a plaque here. Colonel John Brown of Pittsfield, Mass., killed October 19, 1780 at Stone, Arabia, New York. On his 35th birthday, was with Ethan Allen, May 10, 1775, made a gallant attempt to retake the fort September 17th to 22nd, 1777, but failed owing to the sturdy defiance of Brigadier General Henry W. Powell. Colonel Brown destroyed the shipping and outer works, captured 225 British and Germans, and released 100 American prisoners. This tablet, erected by the Massachusetts Society of the Colonial Dames of America, 1935. So we're going into the fort. And again, this is just such a beautiful day. They are going to do an artillery display here in just a minute. And it looks like they're underway.
Now all a soldier would do to go about loading is first open up the pan, reach into their pouch, take out one of these cartridges, tear off the housing of their teeth, pour a small priming charge into the pan, shut the pan, cast the weapon to their left side, pour the shot, the wad, the powder down the barrel, withdraw their ramrod, either made out of wood or iron, using that, seating all the ingredients against the breech of the barrel, returning it to the pipes allotted for it behind the stock, and any well-trained soldier can do this again. Well, what's better than just two well-trained soldiers? I'd like that. 700, we're close. 750. Let's say a whole regiment, or perhaps just a company. Let's say 60 men on Colonel Barrack's company, First New York Regiment. Say they're milling about here at Ticonderoga. Barrack himself rides up, and he says, "All right, fellas, British, if they attack, they're going to come from that direction over there. So when they do, I want you to just stand where you want. Go ahead, fire at them." Anyone see a problem with this?
Yeah, you might keep someone in front of them.
Yeah, we may end up shooting each other. On friendly fire, I see nothing friendly about it. So thus we arrive at a conundrum with Golden's armies themselves, for we need to array ourselves in a specific manner so as we can fire safely and effectively. Now these men were utilizing the 1764 review exercise. Yes, this was Britannic Majesty's review exercise. Now originally this manual called for 3 ranks of soldiers. But we know as early as 1759, New York provincial soldiers are eliminating that rank, just firing these 2 ranks. Now this 2-rank system works very, very well, in the sense that if they're a half-armed distance, the man in the rear rank, he's going to clear the man in the front rank by a nice big margin. But say he's more than a half-armed distance, nothing good coming. Now say I'm a crack shot, unlike these newly enlisted New York people. When I go to take a shot, I like to throw it and I have to move back into it. Nothing good will come of that either.
I know, it's like,
The way in which these men load and fire their weapons is important. And they would hear series of commands to go through this all, starting with command 2. Boys, your fire lock. 1, 2. Now notice we're counting 1, 2. That's 1 second's worth of time, so we all do it together. Handle, cartridge. Bring the weapon down to their right side underneath their breast. They reach into their cartridge box, carrying out a cartridge, tearing off the top of it with their teeth, holding it on their chin so they can prime. When you pour a small priming charge into the can, shutting that cartridge with 2 fingers, the remaining 2 fingers go behind the hammer. Shut your pants. 1, 2. And they pass the weapon about to the left side, barrel up and away from the face, and around it to safety, and they hold the cartridge in the barrel. Start with cartridge. They pour the contents of that cartridge down the barrel, starting in the ball, and draw your rammer. 1, 2. They pull out that ramrod, starting it into the barrel, ram down the cartridge. Use it to seat all those ingredients firmly against the breech. Returning that rammer all but a few inches. Turn your rammer. 1, 2. Fill your fire lock. 1, 2. a couple things that happen. And in the front rank, they take a slight step over as they cock their muskets. And the rear rank, they take a larger step over to bring their left foot 6 inches in front of their right foot so that they now can fire in between the filed soldiers on either side of them. Present, they point their weapons down range, taking careful aim on their target, waiting for the command to fire. And they can go through all of that, once again, just by hearing
It's a lot. They have
Right,
to do for one fire.
1, 2. One, two. 1, 2. 1, 2. Hey, ready? Present. Fire. Half cock. Fire lock. Shut the pan. Shoulder. Door fire. Hey, ready? Present. Fire. Half cock. Fire lock. Shut the pan. Shoulder. Fire lock. 1, 2. Unfix. Stay in it. 1, 2. 1, 2. Show the yard. Fire lock. 1, 2. 1, 2. Now these New York soldiers, they traveled on. Soldiers eventually traveled on north to Canada as they made their way to Illinois, and eventually to the siege of St. John, where the Americans took the surrender of St. John on November 3rd. But with many of these New York soldiers, their enlistments were running out, and they were returning. But General Schuyler himself really liked the well-dressed, well-looking soldiers of the New Yorkers, rather than the motley New Englanders alongside them. The supplies they had stayed in the army for further use upwards as they headed over around Canada. Now, I want to thank you all immensely for joining us for our musket firing demonstration. It's with your support that we support Ticonderoga continue our mission of preservation as well as promoting ongoing dialogue about the role of history and its effects on
It's very fancy. Okay.
Now, before I let you go, here's some of the cool stuff you can do today. Now, following this demonstration, at 11:30, inside the parade ground, through the tunnel, is our museum. At 11:45, along the road into the King's Garden will be our parade ground. At 2:30 and 2:45. Now, if the noise of these guns wasn't loud enough for you, our cannon firing demonstration. Now, at 1:15 today, 3 o'clock will be our continent tour starting with the flagpole. And at 4 o'clock today will be our eyewitness at the top of the mountain. Now, myself and my fellow soldier here, First New York Soldier, we're going to stick around, do our best to answer any questions you may have. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Please enjoy the rest of your day here at Fort Ticonderoga. Thank you.
All those rooms up there, they're full of, that's a museum. They're full of artifacts. Very good information if you're looking for information here. (1775, 1925) in commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the capture of this fort, May 10th, 1775, which was the beginning of the War of the Revolution, in the state of New York, and in memory of the brave men, French British and American who fought and died here. This tablet erected by Alfred Weed Post, Grand Army of the Republic, and Ticonderoga Post, American Legion. The reenactors here are really, really good. The ones that were here before, when I was here the last time, are amazing. Excuse me, they missed his name too. Dedicated to the memory of the gallant band of patrons led by Colonel Ethan Allen, who on the 10th of May, 1775, captured this important fortress and secured for the Americans a valuable base of operations on Lake George and Lake Champlain, erected by the Sons of the Revolution. Except that they miss one of the most important men who was here, and that was Major General Benedict Arnold. He was not a major he was not a general at that time.
They span about 6 feet in breadth, and this is to cushion the impact for a clothing shot. Stone is a very bad thing for the fort out of in the 18th century. The original walls of the fort were not stone; they were wood, and then bark when the British rebuilt them. So this is something you see all the time when you're repairing forts. Actually, the entire east side of the fort, when rebuilt by the British, was not fully rebuilt out of wood. A lot of it just remained earthwork. And so in the batteries, like you see here, you had gabions and displays, and around that earth with wattle fence holding it up, or different log breastworks holding that up too. So this is a very typical defensive wall that you find across the board in the 18th century with batteries. We've actually tested out this technology. The 4-pounder that you see out there, we put on a field carriage, and at a farm where we had about 5 miles of range, we fired live shot from that cannon into 3 gabions lined up, and the ball went through the first one and stopped before it went into the second. So they work.
Yeah.
I would rather be behind those than on the deck of a ship or behind the stove.
But so long ago, or I mean, you would have seen a lot more than this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Going back to
1776 to 1929, through this entrance to the place d'armes of the fort have passed George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Benedict Arnold, Horatio Gates, Anthony Wayne, Arthur St. Clair, Henry Knox, Philip Schuyler, Richard Montgomery, Ethan Allen, Seth Warner, Major Robert Rogers, the Marquis de Montcalm, the Duc de la Lebes, Sir Geoffrey Amherst, Sir Guy Carleton, Major John Andre, Sir John Burgoyne, Thaddeus Kosciuszko, probably pronounced that wrong, and a host of other great men of our history. You who tread in their footsteps, remember their glory. Barrels. This must have been a storage.
That's probably as good a place as any
Very cool. Another plaque. go upstairs later. Redo this because there was a gentleman in here before, and different jackets, different jackets of the different soldiers. Wow, this is cool. Where did the cannon come from? Different places the cannon came from. And then we've got this exhibit of what the exhibit in progress. Fort Ticonderoga feels timeless and permanent, solidly built of stone. In reality, the fort you see today is largely a reconstruction that in many ways differs from the fort of the past. This is partly because throughout its military service, Fort Ticonderoga, or Fort Carillon, as named by the French, was a constant work in progress. It has never been truly been static or complete. Each new occupier made their own changes, resulted in continuous evolution. This exhibit explores the fort's construction and reconstruction throughout its military service and beyond, from its initial establishment in 1755 to the ongoing preservation of the 21st century. Fort Ticonderoga is a symbol of the ever-changing landscape of America and our desire to strengthen our connection to the past, present, and future. Build the fort. Exhibit work in progress. They are doing a lot of work for next year. What's up with this wall? This wall represents a section of the original wooden walls of Fort Carillon. Beginning in 1755, French soldiers constructed the walls from massive oak timbers. The trees that made these timbers were cut from the forest that sat atop the heights of Carillon, just west of the fort. Only the barracks buildings, demi-lunes, and counterscarps were later constructed of stone. The stone walls that you see are a result of the reconstruction efforts begun in the early 20th century. These are the soldiers' barracks. Preservation. Wow. Very cool. Very, very cool. The barracks. Oh, very cool. Hey, the reenactors are great around here. You do a great job. Last time I was here, they were cooking something that looked pretty nasty out there.
Well, if we were French, probably. If we were French, probably.
I don't know. It was a guy had a pot out there, and he was cooking something out there, and I'm like, ugh.
That's fair.
Not sure I'd want to eat that. So we're going up to the top. Wow. Lake Champlain. They're doing some work down there. So we're going to go up this way. Oh, we can't go up this way.
Yeah.
Sharing it with everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's got a nice fire going in here. Yeah. Cutting up a piece of.
No, you're not allowed up there today. Last time I was here, you could go up there. They must change it out. So we're going to go up this way.
Yeah, there's a Morgan horse, right?
Well, there is a Morgan horse.
Mission to preserve. Now, there's something that I wanted to highlight over here that I saw. There it is. Disease, the Army's #1 enemy. Smallpox. So, when I was here a month ago and I saw this, I could not understand why Benedict Arnold's picture was with disease. He was an apothecary, so he would have been very familiar with diseases. Disease runs rampant through the Army. Epidemic, the first major test of American military medical preparedness, came quickly. The winter of 1775-1776 was one of the most difficult the American Army, with barely a single year's experience, would face in the entire war. In an attempt to gain control of the British province of Quebec, 2 American military forces launched simultaneous invasions into Canada. One force, under the command of General Richard Montgomery, left Ticonderoga. The other, led by Colonel Benedict Arnold, marched through the Maine wilderness from eastern Massachusetts. On December 31st, 1775, both armies attacked and General Montgomery was killed. In the aftermath of the siege, the Army contracted smallpox. Because of harsh weather, exhausted troops, crowded living conditions, and the scarcity of provisions, the disease ran rampant through the Army. By February 1776, the disease had become an epidemic. The Army, composed of about 3,200 men, had 1,200 men listed as unfit for duty. As a result of the illness, as reinforcements joined the Army, healthy soldiers quickly contracted the disease. With smallpox continuing to spread, the Army established a hospital for the treatment of smallpox victims in Montreal. Capable of treating 600 men, the hospital quickly filled up. Realizing that without quick action, smallpox would continue to devastate the Army, Colonel Arnold, who had been in command of the Army since the death of General Montgomery, put in motion a bold plan to begin the process of strengthening the Army and ridding it of its infinite detriment to the service. The disease had to be stopped, living conditions needed to improve, and steps had to be taken to ensure that incoming troops did not bring new smallpox cases into camp. Inoculating the truth. Arnold's first priority in getting Army healthy was inoculating the men against the dreaded disease. While the practice was far from accepted and quite controversial, it was known that if a small amount of infected material from a smallpox sore was introduced into an open sore on a healthy person, that person would contract only a mild form of the disease and recover in a relatively short period of time. This would render the person immune to infection in the future, but to be effective and prevent the accidental spread of the disease, inoculation had to be done in a carefully controlled manner. Even though the case of smallpox contracted by the inoculated soldier would be relatively mild, it was still highly contagious, and without isolation, the inoculated soldier could spread the disease just as effectively as a soldier who was infected naturally. Without strict control over the inoculated soldiers, it would be virtually impossible to halt the spread of the disease. As a result, the Army forbade self-inoculation and imposed severe punishments for those caught attempting this practice themselves. Wow. And to think there are certain people who want to do away with vaccines. It is just unthinkable. This is more upstairs. Mohawk Warrior. Isn't that cool? Okay. For its size, Benedict Arnold's fleet of continental vessels has had an outsized influence on models at Fort Ticonderoga until the full-scale reconstruction of the Philadelphia II by the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum between 1989 and 1991. Models were the best and most cost-effective way to visualize the short-lived fleet. And then there's the Ethan Allen capturing the Fort Ticonderoga. The problem is Benedict Arnold also was there. Dioramas generally depicting fleeting but important events. This diorama is an excellent example caught mid-stride in the Green Mountain Boys storm the parade ground at Fort Ticonderoga, with Ethan Allen already at the head of the stairs demanding the fort's surrender. While evocative, it is missing some key historic elements, absolutely. Ethan Allen is depicted incorrectly in a green uniform worn later by the Green Mountain Boys, but not at the time of the fort was captured. Benedict Arnold appears dressed in a blue uniform. In reality, he almost certainly wore the uniform of the 2nd Company of the Governor's Foot Guards from Connecticut, a red coat with buff collar, cuffs, and lapels. Very cool. This is a diorama. The most accurate portion of the diorama is surely the ships in the foreground, made by Colonel Edward P. Hamilton, the former director of the museum. Admiralty drafts of American vessels captured by the British and the recovery of the virtually intact Philadelphia in 1935 allowed for a remarkable amount of detail to be learned about the vessels of Benedict Arnold's small navy. The two mastered row galleries shown under the construction was added to the diorama in 1962. Very cool. He's the Allen. Very cool. Very cool. That is so cool. Very cool. And then this is artillery. This is so nicely done. I don't remember looking like this in the 60s when we used to come here for school trips. Oh, very cool. Very, very cool. Okay, turn them that way. Wow. From this fortress went General Henry Knox in the winter of 1775-1776 to deliver to General George Washington at Cambridge the train of artillery from Fort Ticonderoga used to force the British Army to evacuate Boston. And that would have been Louis Joseph Montcalm. French bake ovens. Underneath you are intact bake ovens built by the French Army in 1757. The large opening here was a chute that wood could be tossed down to heat them. The French Army quickly built 4 ovens to bake bread for the troops as they began to fortify the Ticonderoga Peninsula. The expansion of the post in 1756 included another 2 ovens built of brick just south of the fort. That same year, engineers planned another 2 ovens to be built within the walls of the fort itself to provide the capacity to bake bread even under siege. Construction of those ovens did not begin until 1757 as other projects took precedence. Buried under many feet of earth to make them bomb-proof, they have survived almost completely intact. Very cool. Very, very cool. Okay, we're gonna go this way. Now, when I was here a month ago, they had fife and drum demonstration in the on the parade group, the parade grounds. I don't know if they're going to do that. They are going to do the cannon. Let's go see. They're doing reconstruction. Preservation and restoration of Fort Ticonderoga. And that's some of the work that they're doing. Again, you can see like Ground Point, it's a constant battle. He said that probably the best place that he would have been on his ship, the Liberty, just offshore. Which it's a little hard to see the water. It's better to see from Mount Defiance, so we'll give that a shot. And we're going down to the ovens down below. Very cool. The French ovens. Emergency exit. Those are the ovens, are down in there. Behind this enclosure are intact bake ovens built by the French army in 1757. The ovens survived the 18th century, buried under 10 feet of earth placed over them to make them bomb-proof, and were a popular destination for tourists in the 19th century who often confused the vaulted casemate for the powder magazine. leading up to the construction of the Mars Education Center, completed in 2008. The bake ovens were examined by archaeologists and stabilized to preserve this remarkable architectural survival and plan for access that will allow visitors to visit them in the future. Very cool. Let's see if we can get in this way. We may not be able to. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is kind of the back side. Oh, yeah. These are cannons. Very cool. Women in war. Jewish subjects.
So what that serves to do, that's standing. If you've ever seen a demonstration of black powder fire and fire through, you see that smoke just tends to go around, just obscures your view. And these things stand above that smoke. So the soldiers know where your officers and where your sergeant. So that's cool. And what's it sold on? It's envisioning a javelin. Yeah, be very practical. Use them as well. They're cold now.
Basement here?
There's a lot more here than I realized, especially if you try to
Read all of it.
if you try to read all everything in
can.
3 levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes forever. That's why they offer 2 days.
It would take you forever, and actually there's 4 levels when you go down these steps
Oh,
over
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And it would also take you better hip. Tracy would want to do it all in 2 days. I like these words. Those are really cool. Look, Mom. They cut into them and make it form. Instead of
And these are the soldiers' barracks. Hey. So what are you up to today?
This is where I work on shoes.
Oh, okay.
So right now I'm just preparing the thread that I'm going to stitch a new sole onto each shoe.
Interesting. Must have been a time-consuming process.
It was, yes. It definitely takes a lot of work and practice to fix shoes.
Very cool.
Right now I'm just waxing the thread to make it stronger and to get the individual strands to stick together. And then I'll begin stitching very soon.
Cool. Very cool. Now, are you reenactors? Do you do, or do you have another term for what you guys call yourselves?
I consider myself a living historian because
Okay.
this is my career. Whereas reenactors, I see them as weekend warriors.
Weekend warriors. Okay.
Yeah, I do this 5 days a week, all year long. So this is,
Really?
this is my career, yeah.
Do they have different? Because I was here about a month and a half ago, and they had like the fife and drum. Does that?
Come on over. They go back to school usually.
Oh, okay.
So we get a lot of the kids in the fife and drum that are high school students.
They were very good.
Yeah. This year we were very lucky in that we got a lot of college kids who were music majors, which is
Very cool.
something new, and they were very talented. And they all went back for the semester, but hopefully they'll all come back next year.
Very cool. The guy that was doing the canon, that was leading the canon, that when it was about a month and a half ago, he was exceptional, boy.
Big, tall, loud guy?
Dark hair, yeah.
Yeah, he's here somewhere.
He's really good.
Yeah, his name's David. He's awesome.
Yeah, I grew up 20 minutes west of here, so
Oh, okay.
this is a place called Screwen Lake.
Oh, I know where Screw Lake is, yeah.
Wow, this is the soldiers' barracks. And very much like Fort Stanwix. And I imagine these beds were not comfortable. And I imagine they were lumpy and cold and probably full of bugs. Very cool.
Montgomery are actually camping at Ile aux Noix, having trouble with that. So as General Schuyler has now gotten better, is now leaving Ile aux Noix and coming back here to Ticonderoga. And now he actually leaves General Richard Montgomery in the command at Ile aux Noix. Sorry, that's such a word for me. But General Schuyler is now coming back 200 years ago today after just recovering from his illness. And throughout the time, until about 2027, we'll be representing all these events that are happening on this day. So again, just a little sense for being our American Guard here. So right now I'm portraying someone from Connecticut, Colonel Benjamin Inman's regiment, so a civilian regiment. But you also see more uniformed regiments, such as the 1st New York kids coming here. If you stick around for our cannon demo, you'll definitely see the difference in our uniforms compared to the 1st New York. Before this tour, we're going to jump all the way back as early as 1755, when the fort originally came here. Now, to give a kind of sense of the landscape that we have right now, we only see Lake George. So if you see that lake out there, we only see Lake Champlain. Lake George is on the other side of Mount Defiance there. I will a little turn around for a second. So we only see Lake Champlain from here. Lake George, like I said, is on the other side of that mountain called Mount Defiance. So Lake George you cannot see from Fort Ticonderoga or Mount Defiance. Because, if you ever did, you should probably run, because Lake George is 220 feet higher in elevation than Fort Ticonderoga and Mount Defiance. So historically and modernly, you should never be able to see that lake. So that's why I will say, correcting myself, you only see Lake Champlain. Now, the French who originally arrived here using the waterway system of Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain, it eventually drains into the Richelieu River, which eventually drains into the St. Lawrence, which still drains into what still is the heart of Canada to this day. So the French, they actually arrived here as early as 1609. One of the people coming here being Samuel D. Champlain, who named Lake Champlain as we know it today. But the French, they didn't start building the fort until much later, 1755. One of the reasons why we know anything about the 1750s because there's a little something called the French and Indian War happening. So the French, they need to start fortifying this place. But they never called it Ticonderoga. Originally, this fort, built by the French, was called Fort Carillon. And if you're looking to pronounce it, I always say keep calm and carry on. It's basically like that. So Fort Carillon was this French-built fort as early as 1755. A really cool thing to note, Fort Ticonderoga, as you see it right now, currently, this is an entire reconstruction of what it may have looked like in the 18th century. The original fort that the French built was actually not a lot of stonework. It was entirely made up of the wood surrounding us during this time. So it's a little hard to imagine what the fort would have looked like, but it's definitely not really constructed fully out of wood anymore. Especially if you saw where I was cooking, that really wouldn't be a great thing if it was constructed out of wood. Not to say though, the French did start some stone masonry work in 1757. And it was actually the area right below Fort Ticonderoga. It's closed off right now. We're trying to get it reopened. But that lower area of Fort Ticonderoga was originally called the Besseville, or the lower village of Fort Carillon. That lower village held blacksmith shops, lime kilns, brick kilns. So they started exploding the areas around here and did start some stone masonry work. Even recycling some of the wooden beams from the original fort to actually construct a hospital inside the fort as well. Now in 1757, while the French were living here at Fort Carillon, over at Lake George, there was another neighboring fort. French and Indian War, the British and the French were particularly getting along during this time period. Not much changed for the British in the coming years of the American Revolution, but they started here with the French first. But it was actually the French that really started this. In 1757, the Marquis de Montcalm, the general of the French army, he assembled the largest Native American war party ever assembled on the peninsula. And the French soldiers and their native allies, they began attacking Fort William Henry. If you've ever read the book The Last Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper, or have watched the movie of the same name by Daniel Day-Lewis, that goes down in history as the best iteration up to date of what went down as the massacre that happened at Fort William Henry. A lot of the French and the native allies were taking prisoners of war when they necessarily didn't have to. And in 1757, this massacre became a rallying cry for the British soldiers. The general at the time was General James Abercrombie, and a year later, in 1758, he assembled 16,000 British soldiers. The French who were living here, there was only 3,700 of them. So 16,000, 3,000, you could probably expect who was going to be the victor in that scenario. It was actually the French that remained victorious. When you exit the fort today, you'll exit on what the French called the Heights of Carillon. And when you go down that exit field, you'll not only see our sheep, but you'll also see all the trees around you. Well, in 1758, imagine all those trees around you completely chopped down to the ground. While the French were low on supplies and timbers, they chopped the remainder of these trees and built fortifications that were about 8 feet tall. And the British, they ran straight into these fortifications. In July 8, 1758, actually went down as the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil, until it was later outdone by the Battle of Antietam and the later battles of the Civil War. So this day remains quite the bloodiest day for quite some time, even though it's a war not too many people are familiar with. Now a year later, the British, they did not give up. In 1759, the British came back for the second siege of Carillon, and this time, they won. One of the reasons why, in 1759, Canada was now under attack. So a lot of the French soldiers that lived here now had to go all the way back home to help defend their home territory. And that left Fort Carillon very vulnerable to the British attack. But the French, they left one more surprise for the British Army. Now remember when this place would have almost entirely been made out of wood? Well, that helped in the French favor. The French, upon their evacuation, lit a fuse with the powder magazine, and with that blue sky light blew up the fire gate of Fort Carillon. And memoirs indicated you could hear this explosion at the north end of Lake George. It was pretty powerful for its time period. And the British took about 3 whole days to get all these fires around the surrounding area under control. By then, the French were already gone. Fort Carillon was then in a state of disrepair. And now, it became a British-held fort. The general at the time, in 1759, was now General Geoffrey Amherst. And he then renamed this place to Ticonderoga. Ticonderoga has changed a little bit over the years, but as we have it now, Ticonderoga, it originally stems from a Mohawk word meaning the land between two waters, Lake Champlain and Lake George. And to this day, it's remained Ticonderoga ever since. And the British, they held this for such a long time. But the French and Indian War, if you know about it in your history, that of course did eventually end. So the British, as they were living here, they really lived here only as a peacetime. And they actually went over to another neighboring fort for quite a while. That fort was a French-held fort. It was historically called Fort St. Frederic, and Fort St. Frederic was also blown up by the French. But when the British got there, they then renamed that place to Fort Crown Point. It still remains in ruins today, and it's definitely a lovely sight to see as well if you ever get a chance to go there. Now, while the British were living at Fort Crown Point, in 1773, they accidentally set fire to the officers' barracks, which burned Crown Point. So, they had no choice but to move their garrison back here to Ticonderoga, which again, you would not have seen it like this. Ticonderoga was still left in a state of ruin. The British, they did start repairing some of the work though, and they basically built pretty much modern apartment complexes for their peacetime garrison. And by 1774, there's going to be 42 soldiers here living with their families that consist of 24 women and children. And again, they're living here just as a peacetime. They have no idea, of course, what's about to unfold the following year. If you know anything about April of 1775, the shot heard around the world happened, the battles of Lexington and Concord, the very start of the American Revolution. And while that American Revolution did start, the British who were living here at Ticonderoga, they actually had no idea that a war had broke out because the Americans on the Vermont side completely lost communication to the surrounding areas. And the Americans on the Vermont side, they have 280 Green Mountain Boys of Vermont State Militia in May of 1775 ready to attack this garrison. And these 280 men are under the command of two different generals. And these two generals we might know in our history. The first one is a man by the name of Ethan Allen. If you don't know too much about Ethan Allen, you might know this more infamous name next. The second general is a man by the name of Benedict Arnold. And Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold, they actually form a joint command to have these 280 Green Mountain Boys of Vermont State Militia to attack this peacetime British-held garrison. The British, they're not going to know any of this is coming. So as we continue the story, we're actually going to start to move over to this archway here. So if you want to follow me over there, we'll move over there to continue the rest of the story. So we'll stop here for 1 second, but I promise you we will go inside to more shade and more seats as well. But as we stand right here, just imagine yourself in the shoes of these British. Again, there's 42 of them here with 24 women and children. They're living here with their families. And again, they have no idea the events that are about to unfold. Now, the Americans, I did say there were 280 of them, but there was actually a miscommunication. They're traveling on boats from a place called Hans Cove over on the Vermont side. We can't really see it from here. But over at Hans Cove, Benedict Arnold actually originally commissioned 11 boats to be there. When all 280 men got there, out of 11, there was only 2 waiting for them. And the Green Mountain Boys, Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen, they didn't have enough manpower nor enough time to simply transport over 280 men. So on the night of the attack, historically there's actually only 80 men reported here. The other 200, they had to walk from Hans Cove all the way over to Ticonderoga here. So they didn't come here until the day after. But 80 was still enough to attack this British-held fort. Now the British, while they were living here, they did leave a sentry on duty. While they were still in peacetime, they did still leave someone out here on guard. So this sentry, he was standing pretty much where I'm standing, and about 3:30 in the morning, while everyone else is asleep inside the fort, this sentry at 3:30 in the morning, he's seeing 80 Green Mountain Boys, Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen, rushing the gates of the fort. Now this British soldier, he is trained, so he takes his musket, and he raises it, and he says, "Halt, advance 1," which basically means stop or I am going to shoot you. But he's up against other trained soldiers, so these other soldiers do not in fact halt upon his command. So the British soldier, he raises his musket, aims at one of the Americans, and shoots the musket. But one thing had happened the night before. It had rained entirely in the powder magazine of the British fort. So all of their gunpowder is not working at this point. So the British, at this point, this sentry, he has no choice but to try and rush the gates of the fort here and tries closing these doors behind him. Now as he locks the gates, on the right side of this gate here, you can still see the imprint as you pass by. There's a wicket, a small door. He fails to lock that, so the Americans, they throw open that wicket, unlock the gates of the fort, and throw open the gates. And they rush through the gates of the fort, some of them even scaling the walls. Again, you would not have seen these walls, they were a little bit lower, but this is still terrifying. And these men, women, and children, they're woken up to the sounds of war whoops. They're also awoken to the sounds of no quarter. Which, if you didn't know what no quarter means, this means no mercy and no prisoners. So on that happy note, we're going to walk through the archway, and imagine yourself as these American soldiers rushing these gates of the fort, screaming, no quarter, upon these British people. what they called home, and screaming these cries, no quarter. And Ethan Allen, he eventually records in his memoirs that he rushes up the officers' barracks over there, finds the captain of the guard, Captain William Delaplace, and says, "In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress, I hereby claim this fort and all possessions of King George." Now that quote sounds really awesome, but there's a couple things about that quote. The Continental Congress he mentions had not even met yet. And it's not the captain of the guard he meets with. It is the second in charge, Lieutenant Jocelyn Feltham. So yeah, that quote has definitely withstood time over the years, and you can definitely tell history most of the time is written by these victors. Now, Benedict Arnold, again the second general in command, he was actually originally given the commission to take Ticonderoga, and he formed this joint command with Ethan Allen. So the fort is instead actually given over to the command of Benedict Arnold, and these British women, men, and children, they remain unharmed. This battle of Fort Ticonderoga in 1775 is won with no shots fired and no bloodshed, thanks to the help of this other commander as well. And of course, you might know that infamous name later in history, but before all that, he was very much a well-respected general, even to that of British and Americans as well. Excuse me. In 1775, during that same year, during the winter, a former Boston bookseller, now Colonel of the Continental Army, Henry Knox, eventually comes to the peninsula in December of 1775. So this December will be that 250th anniversary of Henry Knox coming to Ticonderoga and gathering 59 pieces of ordnance, all this artillery. And he eventually makes a 60-day journey up to the heights, Dorchester Heights in Boston. And he places all these 59 cannons upon Dorchester Heights, and eventually causes the evacuation of Boston on March 17th, 1776. So next year, if you're in Boston on March 17th, you can celebrate St. Patrick's Day, but you can also celebrate Evacuation Day for the 250th as well. Now in 1776, back here at Ticonderoga, while Henry Knox is off doing that, the rest of the Americans that are here in 1776, they now begin fortifying Ticonderoga. Those old heights of Carillon, the Americans are going there, again, that exit road, and they're starting to build what's called, what they named Liberty Hill. And at Liberty Hill, they're actually digging up the buried bones of the British and French soldiers who fought all the way back on July 8, 1758. They're also digging around Mount Defiance, that mountain I pointed out earlier with the flag on top of it. And in 1776, that's when it is then named Mount Defiance as well. And the Americans, by the fall of 1776, there's actually going to be 13,000 across these surrounding peninsulas. Mount Defiance, another mountain named Mount Independence, here at Fort Ticonderoga. And if you get a sense of this fort that we even have right now, 13,000 can never really comfortably fit here. So that's why they're divided up between these peninsulas as well in 1776. Now in 1777, the British do eventually make their way back here. They're now under the command of General John Burgoyne, and Burgoyne not only has British soldiers and sailors to his cause, he now has the German riflemen as well. So in 1777, the Americans are forced to retreat upon Ticonderoga here, and in 1777, the British, they eventually win this fort back a second time in its lifetime. The Americans, to get a timeline, again, they only stayed here from 1775 to 1777. Shortest long time period, but as you can tell, they accomplished a lot just by being here. And again, in 1777, this place becomes a British fort once more. So again, it's been a French fort, it's been a British fort, it's been an American fort, and now it's a British fort once again. So it's definitely been through a lot of hands in the small time period that it was here. Now the British, in 1777, the British and the Germans, almost about all of them got captured in the later battles that happened in Saratoga the same year in 1777. So that left a small guard here at Ticonderoga. By 1782, they only encamped here for 2 weeks when they actually evacuated this place, and they took a page out of the French book and they blew up Fort Ticonderoga for the last time. A year later, in 1783, arguably our first tourist actually came here. And that tourist was probably a man that you first learned about in your history books. That was a man by the name of George Washington. And George Washington, he never actually visited here during his own campaign season. But he heard about this place in so many letters and memoirs that he wanted to come here and check out the surrounding areas of Ticonderoga. And that was in 1783. The same year, the fort was then decommissioned as well. And it remained in this state of ruin. It was never reconstructed. And because it remained in a state of ruin, in the 1800s, a lot of the locals were actually coming here and taking the ruins of the fort to build their own homes and houses. Now, the fort was saved after that by a man by the name of William Ferris Pell. William Ferris Pell eventually bought out the peninsula here of Ticonderoga, which today consists of 2,000 acres at the fort. And William Ferris Pell went down in history as the first ever act of historic preservation ever in North America, starting with this little fort here. Now, he was the one to preserve it. He was not the one to restore it. That wasn't until much later when his descendants came here. And that was his great-grandson, Stephen. Stephen, he didn't come here alone, though. He came here with his wife, Sarah Pell. And it was actually Sarah that had the idea to reconstruct the entirety of Fort Ticonderoga as you see it today. And they started over here at the officers' barracks as early as 1909. And if you look at the officers' barracks and you see that white creamy mortar, that is some of the original pieces and parts of original Fort Ticonderoga from all the way back in 1757. They continued the reconstruction with the barrack spaces behind you here in the 1930s and 40s. And one of the newest additions is right over here, what's called the Mars Education Center, named after the Mars Candy Company. That was reconstructed in 2008. That French powder magazine that was blown up in 1759, well, that was where it was reconstructed, is where that powder magazine blew up. And a cool fact I always like to share, when they reconstructed the Mars Education Center, they actually based it off of some original French architecture, unlike the rest of the fort that you see it as. It also has more modern utilities, so if you're ever here during the heat of the summer, yes, it does have air conditioning. So I usually see a lot of people going through those doors during the summer. Now, as you can tell, we're still doing tons of reconstruction even throughout the time period. But we've remained open as a fort since 1909 thanks to the Pell family. But it's not only thanks to them, of course, it's thanks to visitors like you as well. Just by coming here, enjoying the fort, visiting all our different trades, we're able to keep this fort open as a non-profit and private place for many years to come. We are not state or government owned to this very day. That is because of your generous help. So I won't be your last thank you of the day, but I might be some of your first, but I definitely won't be the last if you continue doing our tours and demos, because we do really mean it when we say thank you all the time. So that's what I have for you for the history of the fort itself. The other things that you can see today, following this tour in about 20 or so minutes, I think, right out this archway here is going to be our 2 o'clock cannon demonstration. So you can check that out. Again, if you just walk right out this archway, it'll be in that grassy patch area. Following that, at 2:30, if you want a guided tour of our museums, it will start right here in the parade ground. If guns aren't your thing, but gardens are, at 2:45, you can go out this archway and go down to the gardens and meet at the greenhouse for the 2:45 Breaking Ground tour. And if you really liked my tour, I'm actually doing it again at 3, but you do not have to be there. I almost forgot I was doing that tour. But there will be another one of these tours at 3 o'clock, or if you missed the beginning of the talk, you can very much stay for that as well. But that will be at the base of the American flagpole. And the last tour actually happens off-site here. It's the 4 o'clock Mount Defiance Witness to History tour. If you have that small gold coin on you, keep that, because there is a gate that leads you up to the Mount Defiance. And that tour, again, is at 4 o'clock. But the next up-and-coming thing is going to be the 2 o'clock cannon demonstration, which I'm a part of, so I'm going to stick around here a couple minutes for some questions if you have any. But you'll also see me out by the cannon demo soon as well. So thank you guys again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here at Fort Ticonderoga. Yep, right out the archway.
Left, wheel, front. Set. 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 Left. Wheel. Take and hold. Post. Mark.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
afternoon.
Come on, 5 people?
Good afternoon. Thank you. I expect you all to be a little bit more excited to see a cannon fire. Well, welcome to Ticonderoga to our cannon demonstration. As we're getting this started today, folks, I do need to address our white safety line in the grass before you. No point during this demonstration may you be on our side of it for your safety. We can continue to do a great job of being spread out along it to get a better look at this cannon tool before you and even some of the ammunition used to fire this 4-pound cannon. Where what you're looking at is a cannon crew of soldiers, the 1st New York, the 2nd New York, as well as soldiers from the 4th Connecticut Regiment of Colonel Benjamin Hinman. These men formed the Guard of Ticonderoga at this point in 1775, where 1775, exactly 250 years ago today, these soldiers would have been manning cannon crews exactly like this, firing guns just like this. Where at Ticonderoga, in the midst of the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War, I invite you all to join us in our real-time revolution as we chronicle the stories of soldiers and people at Fort Ticonderoga as we alternate in portrayal through every single different soldier, person, and whoever was here at Ticonderoga from 1775 all the way up until 1777. To that end, today in history, up at Illinois, down the north end of Lake Champlain, the American Army, under Brigadier General Richard Montgomery's command, was left at Illinois as General Philip Schuyler, because of his illness, began his journey back south up Lake Champlain to command the Northern Department here from Ticonderoga. While at this fort, soldiers like these manned supply lines and kept the flow of goods and ammunition going to Montgomery's army invading Canada. That artillery, both here at Ticonderoga and by now on ships on Lake Champlain, was captured here at Fort Ticonderoga in May of 1775. And as the sun rose up and over Fort Ticonderoga on May 10th of 1775, the Green Mountain Boys, Captain Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold, soon began to take count for what they have captured in stores at Ticonderoga. Arnold particularly realized the difficulty of actually accounting for all of the artillery here at Ticonderoga, as many of the cannon, mortars, and howitzers that have been stockpiled at Ticonderoga were not mounted onto carriages or platforms like you see before you. Instead, they were strewn about the peninsula, many of them half sunk in the water and mud of Lake Champlain down to the east on the King's Shipyard. It took Arnold and his choice for engineer, Bernard Romans, 3 whole days to count all of the ordnance here. And they surmised there were either 66 to 64 pieces of it at Ticonderoga, all consistent of old British and French cannons, howitzers, and mortars, as the British Army had stockpiled artillery at Ticonderoga since 1759, the French and Indian War, and during the peacetime years up until the War for American Independence. Much of the cannons here were iron, a lot of them old French iron cannons that had survived the 24-ton blast of gunpowder from the French powder magazine in 1759. This was because iron was a choice material. Iron, both preferred by the French Naval Ministry that funded Fort Carillon, as well as the British Board of Ordnance. Iron was cheap, abundant in the earth. It was also very easily worked. And because of their brittleness, iron cannons had to be cast twice as thick as their bronze counterparts. But this made cheap iron cannon ideal for static fortifications like Fort Ticonderoga, or to be placed on the decks of ships. But regardless of the maker or the metal of a cannon, the British and the French measured their cannon by the weight of the shot they fired. In the British system, there were 3-pounders, 6-pounders, 9-pounders, 12-pounders, 18-pounders, 24-pounders, and 32-pound cannons. Whereas in the French system, there were 4-pounders, 6-pounders, 8-pounders, 12-pounders, 18-pounders, 24-pounders, and 36-pound cannons. And regardless of the system of measurement, its nationality, or its metal, cannons have the same parts. And when I say cannon, I'm referring to this long iron tube mounted onto the carriage. At the front of the tube is the muzzle, and drilled through the center of the muzzle is the hollow cavity that runs the length of the piece, the bore, running all the way back to where the cannon is cast the thickest. down at the breech. On top of the breech, there is a hole drilled down into the bore called the vent, or touch hole. And behind the breech, that doorknob object there, the hascable, or pummel, where, using ropes fixed to the pummel and to the muzzle, you can hoist cannons up and off of the carriage they sit on, utilizing a jin, this tripod structure over here. And finally, just ahead of the center of gravity on the piece are two more iron protrusions. These trunnions rest the weight of the cannon onto the carriage it sits on, and also provide the necessary pivot point to raise and lower the cannon's trajectory while aiming. Now at Ticonderoga, for the cannon that were mounted on the carriages, they sat on these garrison or naval carriages, made up by the British Army in Canada. However, Benedict Arnold also sought to get here large-wheeled traveling carriages, so that, per his orders from the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, he could deliver cannons from Ticonderoga to Boston. These carriages, though, were made up of two large oak cheeks, or elms. These cheeks, carved on top, supported the trunnions of the cannon, and rested up and over those trunnions to the cheeks were iron cap squares and keys that locked the tube onto the carriage. The cheeks themselves were bound together horizontally by iron bolts and a transom. And to the rear and front of the piece, the cheeks rest on two axle trees. These axle trees are rounded on their ends to accommodate the four small iron-tired trucks, the wheels that owe this carriage its mobility. Finally, on the rear axle tree are two removable pieces of wood, the stool bed and the elevation wedge, or coin, both of which can be drawn in or removed to adjust the trajectory of your shot. Now at Ticonderoga, 29 of the guns here in 1775 were, by Arnold and Roman's calculations, either 4 or 6-pound cannons. As these guns had weathered for years upon the peninsula, it became difficult to gauge the 1/4-inch difference of diameter between a 6 and a 4-pounder's bore. But Romans did find in the powder magazine of Ticonderoga, over in the southwestern bastion, 1,430 4-pound iron shot. But accordingly, my comrades have passed out to you cannonballs that belong to 4 and 6-pound cannons. Given that the weight of a cannon is dictated by the weight of the shot it fires, my friends, how much do these cannonballs weigh?
About 15 pounds?
No,
4?
Say it louder, folks, please. 4 or 6 pounds. Very good. That was the given. Now, what do you need to fire that ball downrange? Gunpowder. So, the Americans at Ticonderoga, they abided by the British system of using 1/3 the weight of shot in powder. For a 4-pound cannon ball, you would have rolled them into these nice paper cartridges, where this would have been manufactured from reams of paper drawn out of what were 29 damaged barrels of gunpowder and 500 additional pounds of powder in the Bastion magazine Ticonderoga. These cartridges you're handling, belonging to a 4-pound ball, 1/3 the weight of that ball, how much do they weigh? 1/3 the weight of 4 pounds.
Here you go.
Yeah, 1.333 pounds of gunpowder. Very good. I know there's no math majors in the audience. Yeah, but to fire that downrange, you need to compress all that ammunition to the breech. Doing so, you use wadding. Wadding, made up here at Ticonderoga from old worn-out hemp rope rigging, known as junk wadding, was loaded one on top of the cartridge, a ball on top of that wad, and then another wad on top of that ball. This, when rammed down to the breech, could fire that ball 1.7 miles from a 4-pounder. But the enemy would not always be that far away. And in the event that they got closer to you, you switch over to great shots, a multiple shot. For a 4-pound cannon, it is composed of 9 1.25-inch iron balls, stacked up and wrapped around an iron post and bottom by a linen bag tied together with heavy cording. This ammunition splays from the muzzle like a great big shotgun. Now, This was found in quantities of 3,700 pounds over in the magazine of Ticonderoga. And ordered by the Connecticut Provincial Assembly, Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Mott became, by July of 1775, the chief engineer of Ticonderoga and Fort Mount Point. Samuel Mott, working with General Philip Schuyler, had considerable leeway on how he was to conduct his artillery crews to load and fire these cannons. These officers commanding these artillery crews simply used what they knew best after years of experience in the British military, the exercise of the great gun. This, originally naval exercise, prescribed to the decks of British ships in the Royal Navy, both 1756 and 65, was easily transferable over the oak cannon platforms on land when embraced before them. Within this exercise that called for 6 men around the cannon, 4 around the platform, 5 around ammunition, and each 6th to command the piece, these soldiers would fall into battery upon the command to take heed, where they assemble around the platform. And a call for silence, remain, be quiet, listen for following orders. We're all doing a great job.
Stop the touch hole, handle the sponge stack.
The man to the rear right of the cannon would stop the touch hole with his thumb. The man to the front right handles the sponge staff. Ma'am, I need you on the other side of that board. Thank you. Where handling the sponge staff on this long ashwood pole is a piece of sheep's fleece that has been dumped in water. That sponge is then used to
Sponge the gun.
where is it inserted into the bore of the cannon. This creates a sealed vacuum between the muzzle and the touch hole at the rear of the breech so that it can extinguish any loose embers that could create a misfire.
Handle the cartridge.
Paper cartridge brought up from the ammunition box in a leather haversack, brought up to the man at the front left with a copper ladle who will be ordered to
Put it into the gun.
where they put it into the gun.
Wad to your cartridge.
A wad is then placed on top of that cartridge, and then the man to the front right ordered to
Handle the rimmer.
the other end of the sponge staff is an oak turn cylinder, the rammer. This is used to,
Ram home, cartridge and wad.
with a few good throws, it seats the ammunition home to the breech. Take note, after he seats it, he'll leave the rammer within the bore. This allows the man to the rear right to
Unstop the touch hole. Handle the priming wire. Try if the cartridge be home.
the man picking and priming the piece takes the priming wire, feels for it to just break through the powder charge at the breech, ensuring it's delivered fully against it.
Draw the rimmer.
It is, the rammer will be extracted.
Shot the gun.
Solid iron shot, then placed from a small stack to the front left into the bore, and then a
Wad.
delivered to that shot.
Ram home, shot and wad.
After all of the ammunition is seated to the bore, breech, these men will be ordered to
Run out the gun.
where they seize wooden crows or hand spikes, levers that amplify the strength of the soldier to push the gun into battery.
Handle the powder horn.
Afterwards, a powder horn, a bull's horn of fine-grained gunpowder, is brought up to the man at the rear right, so he can
Prime.
take the priming wire. This time he pierces through and into the cartridge. From the sprung-loaded brass spout of the horn, he pours powder through the vent hole into the cartridge, mounting it on top of the breech. Breaking the horn, he uses a wooden stopper on the other end to
Bruise the priming.
crushing it farther into the vent.
Secure the powder horn.
This is secured away from where the breech explosion occurs, so the horn does not explode.
Take hold of the apron, cover the vent. Handle your crows and hand spikes. Point the gun to the object.
The soldiers, seizing wooden crows and handspikes once more, are conducted to aim and traverse the piece upon the platform with hand movements of left and right, and verbal commands of up and
Down. Lay down your crows and hand spikes.
after the piece has been aimed towards a target, the man to the rear left of the cannon is ordered to,
Take up your match and blow it.
where, burning around this flint stick is hemp cording that has been soaked in spirits of wine. Slow match, blown upon so it's glowing red hot. This is used to
Fire.
rolling a shot down range.
wonder what the difference is between these cannons and what we find getting to the people. They're the ones that just eat them out. I remember everything
They were
was
small, they
about-
were portable, these aren't portable.
Through efficiency of this exercise, the Americans from Ticonderoga mounted artillery like this onto ships on Lake Champlain, from which, under the command of Brigadier General Richard Montgomery, at the end of August, the artillery and army advanced down the lake towards Quebec, base Canada, free that province from the control of British regulars. They, whilst laying siege to the fortifications of St. Jean and Chambly, enjoyed naval supremacy on Lake Champlain through the summer of 1775. Between every shot, the man to the rear, the front right, left rather, would handle what's on the other end of that ladle, the iron screw or wad hook that is used to extract the grease from the breech. Then again, it would be spun. Point the gun.
Smell.
Handle the cartridge. Put it into the gun. Wad to your cartridge. Handle the rimmer. Ramos, cartridge and wad. Now, as the cannons bombarded the defenses of St. Jean and Chambly, ship after ship came back up Champlain geared at Ticonderoga. Handle the priming wire, charge the cartridge be home. These vessels were packed with ammunition, shot, powder, cartridge paper for cannons. Stop the gun. So that the cannons to the north could keep firing. Ramos, shot and wad. Run out the gun. Heat. Handle the powder horn. Try. Cruise the priming. Secure the powder horn. Take hold of the apron, cover the vent, handle your pros and hand spike. Point the gun to the object. Lay down your pros and hand spike. Take up your match and blow it. As the invasion progressed, shot by shot, the walls of Chambly and St. John fell down, all upon the command to fire. Which, between the events at Ticonderoga and in Canada, culminated in the surrender and American capture of St. Jean and Chambly by late October and November 3rd of 1775. Thereafter, the American Army under Brigadier General Richard Montgomery progressed onward into Montreal. But as those forts were captured, so too was more British stores of artillery. That artillery was sent back up the lake here to Ticonderoga. And on December 5th of 1775, when Colonel Henry Knox arrived at this place, of it he selected artillery not only from Ticonderoga and Crown Point, but also from Chambly and St. John. This, being part of the noble train of artillery, eventually brought to Boston by the following year, and completed the orders of Benedict Arnold to get artillery to Boston from the previous spring. And with that, folks, we are brought to the end of our cannon demonstration. Before you get on your way, there is a whole lot more awesome things to see and do at Ticonderoga today. Following this demonstrations in through the archway of the fort at 2:30 in the parade ground, you can take an exhibit tour of the fort's museum. Or, if flowers are more your thing, follow this pathway down here as it winds to your left down to the breaking ground tour of the King's Garden, the glass greenhouse outside its walls. At 3 o'clock, at the base of this American flagpole, a Key to the Continent tour will commence. This, the synopsis of our fort's history.
Or you can book tickets for a carry-on boat tour from the log house to go out on Lake Champlain for 75 minutes of nautical history. And at 4 o'clock on top of Mount Defiance will be a Witness to History tour. Utilizing that little gold coin that you received today on your way into the fort, you can take a tour utilizing the fort's geography from that fantastic view. And finally, and most importantly, folks, we at Ticonderoga are a private non-for-profit organization. This means that you allow us to continue our mission just by being here, of educating upon this fort's history, preserving it, and fostering an ongoing dialogue due to this fort's impact on past, present, and future generations to come. So I thank you all so much for being here today. As this gun is clear, you're welcome to ask us and my crew any questions, but thank you all. Have a great day.
So there must be a game of some sort going on, maybe cross country, Saranac Lake versus Ticonderoga. I can't wait to see how this dash cam comes out. This is going to be cool. Boy, they are doing a lot of work here. I do have to say that this is probably, of all the Revolutionary War sites I've been to, this is probably the very best done one. There's a lot of little plaques. Like I was saying, up by the monument, there's a lot of little plaques. Same thing goes for here. There are plaques throughout. Very cool. This is cool. That is cool.